I still remember the day they let me go, not with a thank you, not even a proper explanation, just a cold HR email. 12 years of loyalty, erased in 12 seconds. I had 2 toddlers at home, an empty fridge, and exactly $14 in my bank account. And no, there was no rich uncle or magic bailout waiting around the corner. It was just me, a single mom, no savings, and 3 mouths to feed. Hey, if this story grips your heart even a little, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because what happens next will leave you speechless. My name is Rachel. I was a junior admin assistant at Bradley & Myers, a mid-sized tech firm, known more for office gossip than innovation. I gave that job everything. I never called in sick. I stayed late, learned systems I wasn't paid to touch, even trained the guy who replaced me. But when profits dipped, they needed a scapegoat. Guess who they chose? Now here's where my story really begins, because I wasn't just fighting for a job, I was fighting for our survival. After they fired me, everything spiraled. My rent was already overdue. I had no backup plan and no one to call. The apartment always smelled faintly of burnt rice and baby formula. The nights, they echoed with my kids' soft whimpers when they realized there was no dinner again. So, I hustled. Day shift at the diner, $9 an hour, plus tips if people were kind. Evening gig cleaning classrooms at the local middle school. Graveyard shift at the call center downtown, where the coffee was bitter and the lights buzzed like dying insects. Some days I forgot what sunlight looked like. Other days I cried so hard I had to hide in the mop closet. But one moment changed everything. A customer at the diner, middle-aged guy, polite, always wore the same navy suit, left his business card along with a $50 tip. Smart people should build their own ladders, not wait for someone else to drop a rope. That's what he scribbled on the back. I stared at that card for days. Eventually, curiosity won. I Googled him. Adam Quinn, founder of JumpSpark Software Solutions. Something clicked. Back at Bradley & Myers, I used to manage vendor invoices. I knew exactly how much they overpaid for outdated SaaS tools. I thought, what if I built something leaner, smarter, and cheaper? I didn't know how to code, but I knew how to research, and I knew how to grind. So I stayed late after my shifts, took free online courses, watched YouTube tutorials while feeding my baby mashed bananas. I called it Bright Desk, a simple cloud-based admin suite for startups and small businesses. I pitched it to 5 local businesses. 1 said yes. The next year, I pitched 50. 10 said yes. By year 3, I had been 200 clients across 3 continents. 7 years after being fired from Bradley & Myers, I sat in the exact boardroom where they'd terminated me, but this time, I was the one across the table. They were hemorrhaging cash. Their tech was outdated. I made an offer. They laughed. I tripled it. In cash. They signed. And just like that, I owned the company that once told me I wasn't strategic enough. I walked into my old office, touched the worn mahogany desk, and felt a wave of emotions. Not revenge, closure, and freedom. The first thing I did, I implemented a free childcare stipend for every single parent in the company. No questions asked. Because I knew survival shouldn't be this hard, and no mother should have to choose between working a night shift and reading her kid a bedtime story. They thought they broke me, but all they did was wake me up. And now, every time someone says, "You don't look like a CEO," I smile and say, "That's funny. Neither did the last one." But here's what actually did happen next. After I bought Bradley & Myers, I wasn't interested in celebrating. I was interested in fixing what had been broken, not just in the company, but in me. The first Monday after the takeover, I walked into that office building, the same building where I once cried in the restroom stall, hiding my pink slip and my shame, and I greeted every employee with a smile. Some of them looked stunned. Others looked embarrassed, especially Craig. Craig was the regional VP who once told me during a performance review, "Rachel, you're good, but women like you rarely get past the first rung unless someone carries you." That day, Craig found a box on his desk. Inside it, a copy of BrightDesk's valuation and a card that read, "This is what happens when we build our own ladders." I didn't fire him. I promoted someone else, a brilliant operations manager named Jordan, a single dad of 2 who had been stuck in Craig's shadow for years. Jordan cried when I gave him the keys to his new corner office. "I thought no one noticed me," he said. "I was you," I told him. Of course I noticed. We turned the company around in 11 months. We rewrote every contract, cut out the bloat, merged with a leaner, younger tech firm that shared our hunger. Revenue jumped 38% in the first quarter. But the real milestone? 3 years into running B&M, I walked into a high school gymnasium, not as a guest, but as a keynote speaker. The topic: resilience in business for underestimated entrepreneurs. I stood there, wearing a white blazer, heels scuffed from years of hustling, and looked out at a sea of teenage girls, some wide-eyed, some skeptical, most silently wondering if anything I said could actually apply to them. I opened with this. 7 years ago, I was working a night shift and eating crackers for dinner while watching JavaScript tutorials. Today, I write the checks that used to bounce on me. One girl in the front row raised her hand, small, shaking slightly. "Miss Rachel, were you ever afraid of failing?" My voice caught for a second. I wanted to say no, but that would have been a lie. I was terrified every single day, I told her. But I did it anyway. That's the whole point. Afterward, her guidance counselor ran up to me in tears. "You have no idea what you just did for her," she whispered. But I did, because someone once left me a $50 tip and a note, and it changed the course of my life. So now, every month, my company sends out anonymous scholarships. No applications, no strings, just envelopes with enough cash to pay for a semester, a laptop, or a dream someone's been too tired to chase. Last year, during a tech summit in New York, I got approached by a man in a navy suit, polished, kind smile, familiar eyes. "Ms. Rachel, do you remember me?" It was him, Adam Quinn, the man who left that business card all those years ago. "You probably don't realize what you started," I said. He grinned. "Funny, I was just about to say the same thing to you." We talked for 30 minutes. 2 people who had nothing in common, and yet had everything in common. Before he left, he paused and said, "You know, most people talk about rising from the ashes, but you built a new fire." That night, I cried in my hotel room, not out of sadness, but out of gratitude. Because somewhere along the way, the girl who once begged for extra shifts became the woman who sparked hope in others. A few weeks after that summit in New York, I received a call that stopped me cold. "Rachel, it's about your old neighborhood." The voice belonged to Marissa, a childhood friend who still lived near our old apartment complex, the one with moldy stairwells and flickering hallway lights. The city had marked the building for demolition. Families were being pushed out. No clear relocation plan, no support, just eviction notices taped to doors. It hit me harder than I expected. That building was where my daughter took her first steps, where I studied UI, UX design, between cleaning toilets and wiping noses, where I once hid behind the curtain when a landlord knocked, knowing I couldn't pay rent. I flew home that same week, walking back into that complex, now half empty, graffitied, Its windows shattered like forgotten promises, felt like walking into a ghost story. A little boy ran past me barefoot, chasing a deflated ball. A woman with 2 kids on her hip nodded at me. She looked tired. I saw my old self in her. That night, I couldn't sleep. So I called my CFO and said, "We're buying the block." He stuttered. "Wait, what block?" "All of it." "Rachel, that's a multi-million-dollar project. There's no ROI. There's no financial ROI," I cut in, "but there's an ROI in hope." 2 months later, the Bright Rise project was born. We didn't just rebuild, we reimagined. Safe, affordable housing, free on-site childcare, after-school programs led by local college students, a co-working center with high-speed internet and mentorship sessions on weekends. The old apartment, where I once cried myself to sleep, now it's a reading center, painted yellow and blue, filled with beanbags and bookshelves donated by publishers who once ignored my emails. One afternoon, while doing a walkthrough, I noticed a young woman sitting outside the community center with a cracked laptop, scribbling in a notebook. She reminded me of me. I brought her water. She looked up, startled. "Thanks," she said, brushing back her hair. "Just trying to finish this online course. Wi-Fi's faster here than my place." "What are you studying?" "App development," she said shyly. "It's stupid. I mean, I don't even know if I'm good at it." I smiled. "Do you want to intern at my company?" Her eyes widened. "Wait, which company?" "Bright Desk." She froze, then whispered, "No way." That young woman, her name was Angelica, now leads our mobile dev team. She's 23 and already mentoring others because someone once took a chance on me, and now it's my turn, over and over again, to keep the cycle alive. The truth? Revenge never fed me. Hope did. I didn't climb the ladder to escape poverty. I rebuilt the ladder, anchored it deeper, so others wouldn't have to jump just to reach the first rung. And when people ask me now, "Rachel, what's your proudest moment? The buyout? The millions?" I always shake my head. My proudest moment was watching a mother walk her daughter into one of our free coding classes and whisper, "This place feels safe." A few months after that moment, something unexpected happened. I got a letter, handwritten, no return address, just my name on the envelope in sharp, slanted cursive. I opened it carefully. "Dear Rachel, you won't remember me, but I was in HR when they let you go. I pushed back in that meeting. I told them we were making a mistake. I'm sorry I didn't do more. Watching what you've built, I just wanted you to know I've never stopped thinking about it. Thank you for proving all of us wrong. Thank you for showing what strength really looks like. A former coward." I read it 5 times, and then I cried. Again. Not from sadness this time, or even pride, but release. It was like an old wound had finally been acknowledged, like someone had walked up, gently placed a hand on it, and whispered, "I saw. I'm sorry." That letter stayed in my wallet for weeks, folded, soft, starting to fray at the corners, like a reminder that even silence sometimes circles back to speak. Then one day, out of nowhere, my phone buzzed. Unknown. Number: "Hi, I know this is strange, but I work for the Forward list. They'd like to feature you on their 100 Women Who Rebuilt the World cover." I blinked. I'd seen that list for years. Celebrities, world leaders, tech unicorns. Never me, but here they were, asking for my story. 2 weeks later, I sat in a photo studio in Manhattan, dressed in a suit tailored in Lagos, my mother's birth city. The stylist had asked, "What vibe are we going for?" I said, Boss, who used to mop floors. They laughed. I didn't, because that's who I still was. The shoot ended, and the editor leaned over and asked gently, "What would you say to the Rachel who got fired all those years ago?" I looked straight into the camera. I'd say, hold on. It's going to hurt, but the pain is fertilizer. Grow anyway. That same night, back in my hotel room, I FaceTimed my kids. My daughter, now 12, held up a drawing. It was me, standing on a stage, smiling. Above it, she'd written in big block letters, "My mom is a builder of dreams." She giggled. "Do you like it?" I choked up. "I love it." Then she added something that stopped me cold. "Can I come to your next event and speak with you?" And just like that, I saw the future forming, not just in what I had built, but in who I had raised. A few months later, I stood on stage at a global women's conference. Thousands of attendees, bright lights, giant screens. I wasn't nervous, not because I'd done this before, but because standing beside me, in a crisp white dress and sneakers, was my daughter. She stepped up to the mic first. "My mom says sometimes the world won't believe in you, but that's okay. Believe in yourself until they catch up." The room went silent, then erupted, and in that moment, it hit me. The company, the buildings, the scholarships, all of it mattered. But this was the legacy, not what I did, but who I made it possible for her to become. The moment we stepped off that stage, reporters swarmed. They wanted quotes, photos, interviews. But I wasn't thinking about headlines. I was thinking about the quiet promise I'd made to myself all those years ago. If I ever make it, I'll send the ladder back down. And so I did. Over the next year, we launched Bright Start, a free incubator program for women-led startups, especially for single moms, immigrants, and women rebuilding after trauma. We started with 5 applicants. 1 dropped out the first week. 2 barely made it past month 1. But 1, her name was Diana, 29, 2 kids, a background in hairstyling, but a brain built for business. She pitched an on-demand beauty service for underserved neighborhoods. No fancy salons, no monthly memberships, just dignity and door-to-door professionalism. I gave her $5,000 of seed funding, a laptop, and a desk in the corner of our HQ. She worked non-stop, took the bus at 5 a.m. every morning, brought her youngest to evening meetings, who once fell asleep, curled up under the conference table. A year later, she signed her first regional partnership. 2 years later, she bought her own building. At a ribbon-cutting ceremony, she asked me to stand next to her. "I wouldn't be here without Rachel," she said into the mic, eyes glistening. She didn't just believe in me, she taught me how to believe in myself. My knees went weak, because I remembered what it felt like when no one had said that to me. And then something happened I could have never predicted. A man approached me after the event. Gray hair, expensive coat, nervous smile. "I was the VP of Finance at Bradley & Myers," he said, extending a hand. "I watched your firing unfold, and I did nothing. But I've followed your journey ever since." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a check, $100,000, made out to Bright Start. "I'm retiring," he said, "and I want to make sure the next generation doesn't wait until they're me to start doing the right thing." I didn't even try to fight the tears. I just hugged him, not out of forgiveness, out of full circle gratitude. A week later, I was back home, curled up on the couch with my kids. No cameras, no headlines, just popcorn and old cartoons. My daughter leaned over and whispered, "Mom, are you happy now?" I thought about it. I thought about the janitor job, the call center, the sleepless nights, the letter from the former HR worker. I thought about Diana, about the check, about my daughter's speech, and I said, yes, I'm finally living the life I used to dream of while washing dishes in silence. She smiled, then asked something I didn't expect. "Do you think I can do what you did?" I looked her in the eye and said, "No, I think you'll do more." That night, I couldn't sleep, not because something was wrong, but because, for the first time in years, I was dreaming forward, not just fighting to survive. I lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking of what it would take to make sure my daughter, and every girl like her, never had to crawl through the same fire I did, just to feel worthy. So I got up and started writing. By morning, I had a blueprint, not for a business, for a school, not a traditional one with standardized tests and outdated textbooks, but a leadership and innovation academy built specifically for young women from high barrier backgrounds. We teach them how to code and invest, how to pitch, how to lead, how to bounce back from rejection, how to negotiate without shrinking, how to walk into a room and own it, even if their shoes were hand-me-downs. Within 3 months, I found a location, a shuttered arts center that once served at-risk youth. Within 6, I secured the permits, and within a year, the Phoenix House opened its doors. We started with 20 students. They came from everywhere: shelters, foster care, immigrant families, homes where they were told they'd never be enough. And one of them was the daughter of the woman who once replaced me at Bradley and Myers. Yes, that woman, the one I trained. She showed up on enrollment day, holding her daughter's hand, eyes full of pride and maybe a little humility. She waited until orientation ended, then walked up and said, "I know I never said it, but thank you. You taught me more than I ever gave you credit for, and now you're teaching her." I nodded, because I had no bitterness left, only fire and forward motion. The Phoenix House quickly drew attention. National media called. Foundations donated. Former students returned to speak at graduation. But there was one guest speaker I'll never forget. My mother. She'd never traveled outside our state before, never spoken into a microphone. She stood on that stage, clutching her scarf and clearing her throat. My daughter used to cry in the dark. She thought I didn't hear. I did, and I prayed those tears were watering something. She turned to me and said, voice shaking, "They were." The room stood, not for me, not for the school, for her, the mother who had once sacrificed everything just to keep the lights on. A few months later, I was invited to speak at a global summit on economic resilience, but I almost didn't go, not because I wasn't honored, but because I had a different commitment. My daughter's first speech. At her middle school leadership assembly, she stood in the gym, fidgeting with her note cards, and said, "My mom built businesses, schools, and communities, but her greatest achievement was teaching me to believe I can build my own. I missed the summit, but I gained something better, legacy in motion." 5 years later, that legacy began taking a life of its own. My daughter, now 17, wasn't just following in my footsteps, she was sprinting ahead. She had founded an online mentorship platform for girls called Echo Rise, matching teenage girls from underserved communities with professional women across the world, not just tech and business, but law, architecture, science, activism, and she didn't ask me to fund it. She built it with a $1,000 grant she won at a youth pitch competition I didn't even know she entered. I found out the night she stood in our kitchen, waving a certificate in one hand and her laptop in the other. "Mom, I just signed my 300th mentor from South Africa." I froze, not because I was surprised by her ambition. I wasn't, but because I saw myself in her, only stronger, earlier, louder. She was who I'd once wished I could be at that age. But she didn't have to wish. She had a runway, and it hit me. All those late nights, all those rejections, all those shifts I took, while my feet bled in secondhand shoes. They weren't just survival, they were seed planting. And now, she was blooming. The following summer, she was invited to speak at a UN Youth Forum in Geneva. I traveled with her, sitting in the audience, clutching the same notebook I used to write my first pitch idea in, now worn, corners curled. She walked onto that stage in a charcoal blazer and sneakers, hair in a soft puff, eyes steady. And she said, "My mother built her empire on exhaustion, grace, and grit. But she didn't build it for herself. She built it so I could build without fear. And now, I'm here to say, we're done apologizing for dreaming loud." When she walked off stage, people stood, not politely, but fully, with awe, with tears, with fists raised in quiet solidarity. And I just sat, staring at her, hand over my heart, whispering the same words my mother once said to me. Those tears were watering something. Back home, life slowed. Bright Desk was now run by a trusted CEO I'd personally mentored. The Phoenix House had expanded to 2 new cities. Bright Start had funded over 400 women-led ventures globally. And I was finally resting. Not retired, not gone, but finally able to breathe. I spent mornings in my garden, afternoons mentoring 1 or 2 founders at a time. Sometimes I taught workshops, sometimes I just listened. And once a week, I met with my daughter at our favorite coffee shop, just the 2 of us. She called those meetings legacy syncs. One morning, she pulled out a folder and said, "I want to build something together, a mother-daughter fellowship program for women and girls rebuilding side by side. We'll call it Second Flame." I smiled. "You always name things like a poet, and you always build things like a storm," she said, laughing. We clinked coffee cups, and right then, I realized something no headline could capture. The real story wasn't that a single mom once worked 3 jobs and bought the company that fired her. The real story was what she ignited after. Sometimes, the world breaks you so deeply, you think all that's left are the shattered pieces. But what if those pieces aren't ruins? What if they're blueprints? Rachel's story wasn't just about grit or revenge. It was about choosing to build when life only handed her rubble. And in doing so, she didn't just change her future. She rewrote the narrative for every woman who thought she was too tired, too late, too small to matter. But maybe the real twist is this: she didn't rise alone. She rose so others could rise too. Now the question is, what will you build with your broken pieces? Tell us in the comments. What part of Rachel's journey hit you the hardest? What legacy would you want to leave? And if this story moved you, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because every week we share powerful stories that prove your past isn't your limit, it's your launchpad.